Yo, what's up? This is Understare, and welcome back to my channel, where I like to talk about all things spooky, scary, and have a little bit of fun. Today on the channel, we are going to be talking about Together, the brand new super gross body horror movie coming out of Neon, starring Dave Franco and Alison Brie. That's right, we're going to be going over the movie, covering the entire thing, breaking it all down, going over the ending, and I'm going to review the film, letting you know what I thought about the movie. This is a movie that I've heard a lot of people very excited to see coming out this year. First of all, Neon has a really good track record when it comes to horror. They have a pattern of coming out with some really wild and visually stylistic horror movies. Their movies normally explore some really different types of grounds here, and I'm excited to see anything that they put out personally. And whoa, throw in Dave Franco and Alison Brie into the mix? That's interesting. Two actors that I don't necessarily think of horror when I think about, but I'm excited to see how they do in these roles. Together is a 2025 supernatural body horror film written and directed by Michael Shanks in a directorial debut. The film stars real-life married actors Dave Franco and Alison Brie, portraying a couple who move from the busy city to a seemingly quiet countryside. Here they'll find themselves encountering a strange and mysterious force that horrifically seems to cause changes to their bodies, testing the very limits of the lovers' bond. Body horror is one subgenre that is absolutely beloved by horror fans. It's kind of a hit or miss, and it relies a lot on visual cues as well as the absurdity of the movie that it takes place in. It really hasn't been too long since The Substance came out, and that absolutely swept audiences. So, will Together stand up to that feat? Now, we've got a lot to go over when it comes to the rules, the lore, and the mythos of this movie, so how about we just jump right into it? The film begins with a search party deep in a wooded area calling out the names of two individuals. As the camera pans around these spooky woods, we see two dogs break away from the group and find a cozy little cave surrounded by mysterious bells adorned with culty sun icons. The dogs explore the caverns, finding a particularly evil-looking well at the bottom. The thing looks like some kind of inverted tree stump, complete with roots growing out onto the stone. The two dogs drink from the water and moments later are found by their owner standing still, deadlocked, looking into each other's eyes. The owner finds this odd, but things go from bad to worse when later that night he's awoken by some insane sounds coming from the dog kennel. In a scene that's an obvious homage to The Thing, the guy finds the two dogs now fused together into one monstrosity. Now, we're introduced to our slaughter fodder for the film, a grounded elementary school teacher named Millie and her longtime boy partner Tim, an aspiring but seemingly failing musician. We meet the two at their big old going away party being thrown for them by all of their friends and family. Though they claim to not be going far, the pair are about to embark on a move a few hours north, out of the city and into the more secluded countryside. When has that ever gone wrong in a horror movie? At the party, we see Tim chatting it up with his boys about how he's lost his spark and fallen off a bit, having been completely dropped by his record label. But his friends here have a little plan to get him back on track by taking him on their next big tour. Elsewhere at the party, Millie is berated by her bestie for sticking it out with the guy. He doesn't have a job, can't drive, and is still head over heels for his music career. Millie waves this all off though, as he's a sweet guy and she just loves being with him. The crowd convenes and we get a little speech from the couple about how they'll miss their friends, but promise to come back and visit when Tim notices the crowd goes silent. As he turns to see the cause, he finds Millie on one knee and she proposes to him in front of everyone. Tim's shocked by this and freezes momentarily before saying yes and promptly apologizing for embarrassing his girlfriend. That night, the two lay in bed and air some grievances with one another. For one, it's both clear that they've decided to shrug off the would-be proposal and clear that these two are having some serious intimacy issues. Millie here notes that they haven't been physical since something happened to Tim that killed his drive completely. The man's trying his best to fall asleep when from right next to him in bed, he hears Millie going in on him about how worthless and bad of a guy he is. Disturbed by this, he turns to his partner, asking how she could say such a thing, only to find the gruesome image of an older woman in her place. Frozen in fear, we get some wild visuals as Tim sits directly across from another couple in bed, though this one looking demented and decayed. The visual resembles the grandparents' bed from Willy Wonka as the room twists and swirls. Tim tries to retreat under the covers but is ambushed from below by the scary woman. The nightmare ends as Tim awakes in his new home and drifts his way downstairs to find Millie unloading the van. For a moment, Tim has to be sure he's awake and asks her if she still resents him. To this, she snarkily responds that she'd resent him a little less if he'd lend a hand, but that's enough to prove to him that he's grounded in reality here. After the two unpack, Tim gets some time to practice for his upcoming tour, asking Millie to take him to the train station for a practice by the end of the week. Millie heads to her new job at a new elementary school where she holds the high ambitions to help make an actual difference in these kids' lives. She's so used to the massive populations in her old classrooms that didn't really give her the chance to assist the kids. Meeting the faculty, she's first given a pretty rude welcoming from an older lady, but a man by the name of Jamie Jamie interjects and gives her a proper welcoming. Jamie is a nice guy, and after asking about how Millie and Tim were adjusting to the town, he explains they're practically next-door neighbors. He lives in the little yellow house right on the corner. Yikes, well, what an embarrassing proposal, huh? Off-rip, we learn that there is a lot of history going down between these two. They've been together for a very long time at this point. These aren't any freshly seated lovebirds. Immediately upon meeting these two characters, we see that they've got some pretty strong contrasts between the two of them. Now, it's true that opposites attract, but just keep that in mind as we go through this movie, because we're going to be exploring these differences, putting them under a microscope at certain points. It's very clear that something is up with Tim. Just from this little nightmare sequence alone, though, we learn that he is a very disturbed individual. The visuals and the editing around this nightmare sequence are really cool, and this is the type of stuff that we expect coming out of Neon. The cinematography straight up just hits for me, man. And can we talk about that Thing reference with the dogs at the beginning of the movie? If you've seen it, you've seen it. I don't have any clips to include here, but definitely a Thing reference. The next day, Millie and Tim embark on a hike through a trail near their home. The walk starts off nice, but as the weather turns sour, they quickly become lost in the foliage. Frustrated and doing their best to push home, they come across some brush adorned with these creepy sunbells from the intro. Since our protagonists didn't see that bit of the movie, they keep along the trail, eventually falling into the very cave from the beginning. Searching the cave for a way out, they notice strange church pews lodged deep into the walls as if they were growing from them, and break a few apart to build a little fire. Acknowledging the expansive and semi-dry nature of this cavern, they decide to wait out the storm to further avoid injuries. Some time passes, and after realizing that they would be spending the night down here, Tim decides that he's seen enough Man vs. Wild to know that the water found within the inverted tree well at the deepest point of this cave is probably clean for drinking. After trying a bit himself, he determines it's for sure clean and refills their water supply. The two pass the bottle back and forth as they begin to act as if they're intoxicated and chat through slurred speech. Millie asks Tim about earlier in the week when they were unpacking their new home. They heard a strange sound coming from the ceiling, and Tim was able to find the cause: a bundle of rats tied together by their tails roasting above a ceiling light. Tim explains that he's seen this before. As a child, he had a similar situation where a rat was stuck above his bedroom light. He didn't notice it, but his father did and demanded that he cleaned his room repeatedly, often destroying the room in order to assert his frustrations. This story quickly switches tracks to Tim seamlessly telling a different story about how when his father died, it broke his mother's brain. She dove deep into insanity and refused to believe that anything was wrong with her partner as he decayed and stayed next to her in bed, day after day, night after night, until eventually, Tim arrived to visit the two and found his mother laying next to his horribly decayed father with a twisted grin stretched across her face. Tim weeps as he explains the thick, noxious, rotten air in the room, explaining he could even taste it. That night, the couple sleeps in the cave and Tim is startled awake by some really wild sounds echoing throughout it. First assuming there must be some massive monster or like a dragon or something down here, we realize the sound is the cave itself breathing as he does. Tim slows his breath and the cave swells and mimics him. When he turns to Millie, she's hyperventilating and this image jolts him awake. The sun has risen and the two are safe and sound inside of the cave. They give a little stretch and start to get out of their makeshift sleeping bag, but for some reason, their legs seem to be stuck together here. They give their limbs a tug, but something weird is up. Trying a bit harder, they painfully manage to separate themselves, declaring it must have been some kind of weird mildew gluing them together. Arriving back home, Tim zones out exhausted while Millie takes a shower. Returning to her partner, she asks for a massage that doesn't really go well. Tim, in his PTSD-riddled zone-out state, goes a little too rough and scares his girlfriend. Pushing back and heading out to the store for groceries, Millie tells Tim to relax a bit and hits the showers. He does, but something supernatural occurs when Millie pulls out of the driveway. Tim slams his head against the wall, sliding around the shower to face Millie's direction the same way a compass does. He's dragged about, cracking the tiles with his face as he's hypnotically pulled forward. Eventually, he regains control, injured and freaking out about what just happened. Yeah, man, maybe don't drink the water. This is peak big dummy activity in a horror movie right here. Now, I'll give it to him. There's some seriously evil eldritch energy floating around in this tunnel here. The whole thing is covered with these crazy bells with the sun logos on them, as well as various religious paraphernalia. Immediately upon entering this chamber, the characters even mention that the whole thing just feels crowded, like there's something weird going on here. They can feel it in the air. And hey, we saw what happened to the dogs, didn't we? We know enough to know that the humans probably shouldn't be drinking out of that water. We do finally know a little bit more about Tim's hang-up though, don't we? And man, this poor guy. Oh my goodness, that's crazy. We learn that the guy lost both of his parents. We learn that the dad died before the mom and that the mom completely lost her mind. We don't exactly know what happened to the mother. We just know that she lost her mind and eventually perished herself. But man, what an awful thing for Tim to have to walk in on. And of course that scarred up his psyche pretty bad. We're led to believe that this whole event of him walking in on this didn't happen too long ago. So like, it makes a lot of sense why he's suffering from so much PTSD and the dude's having such a hard time getting along. We're already starting to notice that water taking effect too. I mean, what was going on in the shower there? The two of them have now somehow become tethered together with their bodies just seeking to make contact at all times. It's pretty strange. That night, Millie's coworker Jamie stops by with a bottle of wine as a gift for the new couple on the street. Millie invites him in and the three enjoy a nice dinner together where they ask him about the strange cave that they'd been trapped in. Jamie informs them that there was once a small church located out there where a religious commune held their ceremonies. This raises some culty alarms for Tim, but Jamie shrugs this off and says that the group disbanded shortly after losing the church. The convo gets a bit awkward here as Tim and Millie do the very real couple thing to do and begin bickering with each other back and forth in front of their company, getting increasingly more passive-aggressive and agitated as they sling little remarks back and forth. Jamie, who you'd expect to be running for the door by now, simply inserts that it sounds like the two are perfect for each other and really complete one another. Jamie heads home for the night and almost immediately Tim starts displaying jealousy over the attention his girlfriend was giving their guest. Millie dismisses this and is alarmed that Tim would even insinuate such a thing. The two begin to fight, but fury turns to passion and they start loving it up by the door. Millie is stoked as the two haven't been intimate since Tim's parents died, but the moment's ruined when their lips get stuck together for a moment, as if sealed by Gorilla Glue. And Millie believes this is just another episode of Tim spacing out and maybe biting her a bit too hard. Waking up the next day, Tim is extremely nervous about heading back home for band practice and does his best to get himself together for the big day. Millie drops him off at the train station, telling him to take his time and hang with his friends while he's out there. She's been noticing his descent into madness and just thinks that he needs to blow off a little steam. After all, he did mention at their dinner fight that he's starting to feel trapped in their relationship. Tim reflects that he didn't mean that, but thanks his other half for the concern. With Millie heading off to the school, leaving Tim at the train station, he starts having a paralyzing anxiety attack while she discusses everything that's been happening with her best friend from back home. Her friend is extremely concerned here as she just doesn't see anything good about Tim, but Millie asserts that there's a good guy in there. He's just been dealing with a lot of trauma on the surface. Back at the station, the anxiety attack has turned into full-on hypnosis as Tim abandons all of his gear on the train tracks and walks his way all the way to the school to find his girlfriend. Millie is shocked and confused to see him there, but he explains that he's been consumed with an overwhelming need to be with her, and the two end their dry spell right then and there by shacking up in the bathroom. At first, the two are too overwhelmed with emotion and sensation to really take in what they're doing right now, but as they both get some clarity, they realize exactly where they are and what they've just done. Worst part, they're stuck together. The two try their hardest to separate before being caught, but seeing some shoes at the bottom of the door, and another pair joining quickly after, we hear a little knock. The two pull apart and Tim hides while Millie does her best to convince Jamie that she was having some womanly emergencies. The plan surprisingly works until Tim steps off the toilet he was hitting on too early and is spotted by Jamie. Yeah, so this was a rough scene. There is just so much going on here that makes you wince and cringe. Besides the fact that they're doing what they're doing where they're doing it, there's also the insane fact that they get stuck inside of each other like that and have to forcibly pull themselves apart. Man, it is brutal. Fortunately, it doesn't get as bad as I guess it could have here, but man, that still sucks, doesn't it? The two arrive home where Millie starts freaking out about the cops coming after them for what they did today, and Tim breaks down that he's straight up not doing okay right now. Millie gets irate and explains that she is not his mother, no matter how much she feels like she's married to something that's already dead, ordering Tim to wait at the house. She ventures down the street to the little yellow house to do her best at begging for forgiveness. She arrives to the door, ringing a cute little bell fashioned as a doorbell at the entryway to the little country home, and here is warmly greeted by Jamie. She starts explaining she's so sorry for earlier, but he tells her that it's fine. He didn't see a thing. She starts trauma dumping a bit, explaining the problems that she's been having with her partner, and where we'd expect Jamie to take advantage of her vulnerability, he instead bolsters her up, encouraging her not to take her other half for granted, stating that he once separated from his own boyfriend only to find that in the end they deserved to be together. After all, it was some Greek philosopher that said that man was so powerful that Zeus had to split them into two beings. Having 8 heads and 2 limbs just made the humans too powerful for gods to control. Millie is touched by this and states that Jamie must miss him, before noticing Tim hilariously watching her from the window like Michael Myers. That night, the two head to bed, and this time we see Millie startled awake from her sleep. She feels a tug on her hair and turns around to find it lodged deep within Tim's throat as he lays wide-eyed and struggles to breathe. She freaks out and wakes him up out of his trance. The two once again struggle to separate themselves and eventually manage to pull her hair free. Now forced to acknowledge that something is very wrong with Tim, he seeks answers from a doctor. They can't do much for him, but imply that due to his mother's psychiatric history and mental breakdowns, it'd be best for him to take it easy and try some muscle relaxers in the meantime. That way, at least when the mind gets tired, the body will be forced to relax as well. Before leaving, the doctor mentions that they shouldn't go exploring the trails by their home, explaining that a couple of hikers had just gone missing up there not too long ago. Returning home, Tim researches these hikers and learns that they were a couple who disappeared in the same exact spot that they did just a few days ago. Using EXIF data from their social media photos, he learns that they visited the same cave after noticing the same sunbells surrounding it. Shortly after, Millie slams face first into the frosted glass doors behind him. Tim inspects this visual, trying to understand what is happening as Millie slides across the glass just as he did in the shower before. Tim throws open the door and Millie crashes to the ground before him. Startled awake, Tim does his best to explain that they may suffer whatever is the same fate that happened to the hikers. But Millie is so thrown off by all of this that her brain is breaking, and the only thing she knows is that she needs to be away from Tim. As a drop of blood drips from her wounded nose, she declares that Tim should sleep on the guest bed tonight, coldly stating that she doesn't want him anymore. As she leaves the room, Tim looks back down at the table and sees that that drop of blood has now taken a L-turn and is headed right towards him. The two go to bed, with Tim calling out a discouraged and unanswered "I love you" from down the hall, before they both drift off to sleep, and everything here just goes from bad to worst. Tim wakes up as he's being dragged down the hall by unseen forces. He does his best to halt himself, but Millie opens her door and begins contorting her way to her partner down the hall as well. The two try their best to stay apart, but it's no use. Their bodies are being pulled like magnets towards each other. Meeting at last, they begin to fuse together by the hands in a painful and vicious manner. Tim thinks fast and instructs Millie to grab the relaxers, knocking them to the floor before both of them start taking as much as possible to stop whatever here is happening. This does seem to work, but Tim eventually just blacks out from the effects. It's the morning now, and Tim awakes to Millie taking charge of things. Their arms seem to have been unfused enough to separate, but they're still pretty conjoined, with only a few pills left to stop the process. Looking around the room, Tim sees a power saw as liquor is forced down his throat. The plan here? Millie is going to free them by cutting through the last bit holding their arms together. This works, but the two are in really bad shape now. Okay, so now things are really starting to crank up here. Something about whatever was in that water that they drink seems to have made their bodies just magnetically pull towards each other, as I kind of mentioned earlier. It's very strange, but we see it in full effect here. As they're being pulled and drawn towards each other, they meet in the middle and start to fuse together all crazy like. It seems that this is something happening completely independently of their own thought and motor process. And it's kind of explained to us in the movie that the body and the mind kind of have a will of their own here. The thing that they're infected with, this thing that draws them closer together, this thing that's trying to fuse them into one, it seems, is only able to take full effect whenever the mind gets tired enough and the body is able to completely move on its own. It's kind of similarly expressed here as to like sleepwalking, if you can get my vibe. This is why the muscle relaxers work. This is why the muscle relaxers are able to get them to kind of pull apart from each other. It's because when they take the muscle relaxers, it causes the body to go to sleep and their mind is able to do the rest of the work for them. Why exactly do the muscle relaxers allow them to like unfuse their skin and bones? I don't know about that one. You know what? It's just some eldritch magic. We're just gonna leave that alone. That is what it is. But the relaxers do work. That seems to be the one thing that they're able to get to pull themselves apart in this situation. Besides the saw. The saw works. The saw definitely pulls them apart as well. And that scene is brutal, man. Like, wow, I guess it could be more gory. It could have been more dramatic, but it really does hit. This movie hits some major high points when it comes to intensity, and this is one of them. If you're somebody that's expecting this to be like super gross and disgusting, it doesn't exactly hit that point. The CGI, when they're kind of like melding together and stuff, that kind of does look pretty disgusting to me. Hear me out, we're gonna have to talk about this, okay? It's not like practical, it doesn't look that good or anything. It definitely looks like it's CG. I'm sure that they're probably were some practical effects involved in all of this, but for the most part, there's some wild looking CG going on here. And as I've stated before, when it's done right, the wild looking CG kinda does do it for me. It hits this uncanny valley level, and it just looks weird enough to feel gross and icky to me. But hey, it's not practical. It doesn't look super dry and practical. It doesn't look like the OG thing or anything like that, you know what I mean? Tom Savini isn't cooking in the kitchen with this one. Deciding they need to go to the hospital, Millie realizes that she'd left her keys over at Jamie's house. She heads to retrieve them, and Tim takes this unsupervised moment to return to the cursed cave looking for answers. Millie enters Jamie's home and finds it seemingly abandoned besides the faint sound of a TV playing in the back room. So doing as all good horror protagonists do, she follows the sound to the glow of a VHS tape displaying Jamie and his partner getting married in a chapel covered in sunbells, bearing the same paintings and pews that were previously seen in the cave. In this video, the two are married within the conventional-looking church before venturing below the church to the caverns of the cursed cave. Here, we see a ritual performed as they slash their arms and join hands. Back at that cave, Tim arrives and climbs his way back down inside. Here, he gets stuck and trapped when the cave emits a strong goo that holds him strapped down inside. From within this cave, we see an intensely deformed creature as it crawls on all fours through the darkness. A monster consisting of the two deceased hikers with 2 heads, 8 limbs, and 1 voice begs for help as it crawls over Tim's defenseless body. Noticing a pocket knife lodged within the creature's neck, he pulls it back and slashes back at the monster, getting some space and fleeing from the cave. At Jamie's house, Millie is startled by the homeowner emerging from the shadows and explaining that she need not be afraid. Just give in to the process. It's the ultimate experience of intimacy with your partner. Millie freaks out and makes a break for it, but Jamie manages to cut her first with the same religious ring seen on the VHS tape, bleeding out from her arm. She makes her way back home where she meets Tim exactly where they first separated. With the pills gone and the magnetic pull doing its weird thing, the two try their very best to stay apart until Tim realizes exactly what has to be done here. First, he gets on one knee and proposes to the love of his life, telling her everything he feels and showering her in the love that he should have been all along. Then the vibes get kinda bad here when he instructs her to close her eyes and states that this is the only way to halt the process. Before he can retrieve the pocket knife, however, Millie admits it's already too late and shows him the cut on her arm. She collapses with Tim holding her close and the two weeping as their time together expires. Moments pass as Tim carries his partner to the couch, and as her color returns, so does her vitality. Confused as to what just happened, we're informed that at the end of their journey, Tim made the decision to fuse their limbs in an effort to save her life. It worked, and now smitten by each other, the two give in to the magnetic pull. Putting on Millie's favorite Spice Girls record, the two dance one last time before stripping down and allowing the horrible transformation to happen. The final shot of the film shows Millie's parents stopping by to visit their daughter, only to find someone entirely different answering the door. Yeah, so it would seem that in the end, love conquers all, does it not? I'm not 100% sure what the message was at play here, but we're gonna talk about the ending and go over everything that there is to cover here, so let's jump on that. First of all, let's go over the rules, the mythos, and the lore of this whole evil chapel curse cave thing. First and foremost, it seems the way that everybody was infected by this whole curse was by drinking from this weird inverted tree stump thing. We saw the dogs drinking from it at the beginning of the movie, and then they quickly are just merged into one dog. The crazy creature is shown to us for just a second, and I don't have anything to show you guys here, but trust me, it's nasty. The hikers also were pretty nasty looking when they merged together. We'll talk about their appearance a little bit more in a second here, but presumably speaking, they were also drawn to drink from this weird well. As I stated earlier, it seems weird and super stupid of Dave Franco's character Tim to just go over there and start drinking out of the water, you know what I mean? But I feel like there was some mystical allure to the whole thing that was just drawing them in and making them do it. Clearly, there's like something supernatural at play here, so we'll give it that as well. It seems that the whole thing that this religion that was based around it, the church that was above it, the thing that happened with the dogs, and the thing that happened with the hikers and our main character in this movie. You drink from the water, and then you and the one you drink from the water with start to experience some kind of crazy bond that in the end fuses you together into one individual being. This is crazy, but apparently it's the body's response to this magical water that they found. Why does that happen? Why is the water magical? How did this get there? How did the church get based around it? Was the church the chicken, or was the water the egg? Honestly, these are things that we just don't have have the answers to. But the whole ritual that was based around this whole fusion technique is truly interesting, isn't it? It makes me wonder if maybe Jamie is some kind of eldritch terror himself and was able to curse this well and bring about this whole thing on the city. Or maybe this is something that's been there since the beginning of time. Truly, we do not know. The one thing that we do know is that the only way to stop this ritual and halt it in its tracks is if one or more parties here dies. It seems that if you're able to kill your partner while you're in the middle of fusing, it will just stop the whole thing in its tracks and you'll have to exist like that forever, like the hikers did in the cave. This is essentially what Tim and Millie were going for at the end of the movie. Now, this kind of brings up the question of why would the people who are in the church doing the ritual use those rings? Why do they cut their arms when they go into the whole thing? Well, we gotta do a little bit of dot connecting and theory crafting here, but because of how Tim was able to save Millie at the end of the movie, I'm led to believe that maybe this is something to like keep them from backing out of the ritual. If they're both put in a position where if they stop the ritual then they will die, then you kinda are forced to go along with it at that point, aren't you? At one point, Millie hits Jamie when she's trying to escape, and he kinda splits into his two personalities for a second there. It's super weird. This makes me wonder, are the two still kinda coexisting in there at the same time, or are they just one new person altogether? I'd believe that they'd retain their memories, but maybe I'm just thinking about this too much at this point. The ending transformation is absolutely crazy gross and weird, man. Like, really, when they morph together into one being, when they're morphing together, the CG blob thing that they create is so bizarre. And then the, like, character that they make that's supposed to be a blending of the two of them together, at least I'm pretty sure, I don't think that that was a real it looks weird in AI. I think that this was like a CG generation of like these two characters mashed together. But it looks weird, man. It's super trippy and crazy. The body horror in this movie I thought was really good. It's gonna come down to whether or not you appreciate the CGI in this and whether or not you think they pushed the gross factor far enough for you as a body horror fan, but personally speaking, I thought this checked the boxes for being a body horror. I thought this was good. Is it the craziest, most practical, or most disgusting body horror film I've ever seen? No. But the story they tell here is really good, and it's really cool seeing these two actors who are a real-life couple doing this whole thing on camera right here. It's really wild, and they portray their characters so well because they just know each other so well. They don't do stuff like this a lot in Hollywood, so it's cool to see when they do. At the end of the day, I really enjoyed the movie. I thought that it was good, and I recommend you going out and seeing it for yourself. But how did you feel about Together? Have you seen the movie? If you did, comment below and let me know. While you're at it, let me know how you felt about my video today and the lore that we delved into in this movie. How do you feel about body horrors? How do you like them compared to other horror movie subgenres? However you're feeling about it today, comment below and let me know. If you enjoyed my video today, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content just like this. I'm still pretty new over here on YouTube, but I've got hours and hours of awesome horror content over on my channel for you guys to browse. Be sure to check out the rest of my catalog. You'll probably find some other things you really like. And if you really enjoyed the video today, be sure to send it over to a friend you think might enjoy it too. I've been Eldritch Terror, and whether your day's been going good or bad today, I hope it gets better.